Let me get this straight. The Cubs are rebuilding, and they kept their superstars. The White Sox desperately need help, and they did nothing. What? Sports Talk Chicago with Jon Zaghloul. In today's video, we're going to break down the trade deadline for both Chicago teams and explain why both cases resulted in colossal failures. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, set up notifications, and hit the like button on this video. Be a part of the community. We have videos daily on Chicago sports and interviews with people from inside the sports world. If you want to find more podcasts, articles, old interviews, and my social media links, go to sportstalkchicago.com. That's sportstalkchicago.com. I want to start today with this. Life lesson alert. Get out your pen and paper. Sometimes you have to be your own advocate. No one's going to do it for you. No one's going to tell you what you need. You have to speak up and say what you need so people know. If you want a raise from your boss, you have to say something. Your boss is not going to read your mind and tell you. You need a test at the doctor. You need to ask for it. The doctor's not going to assume you need it. You need to be your own advocate. You need to realize, hey, something's wrong. Something is happening that I don't like, and it needs to be fixed. We need to find a solution. We need to get it figured out. Obviously, the White Sox and the Cubs are not their own advocates. They're just idiots. I really don't get it. The White Sox needed help. They're 500. They've been 500 all season long. Nothing has changed for them. And what's their response at the trade deadline? A left-handed reliever with a 4 ERA. I know who Jake Diekman is. I followed Jake Diekman. I remember watching him pitch on the Texas Rangers in the early 2010s. He is nothing special. I can't believe he's still on a team. And that's all you could do. Well, we made a phone call to Shohei Ohtani. Not good enough. Get it done. We were in play. No, you weren't. You made a phone call. You said, hey, is he available? No? Okay, bye. That doesn't count as doing the work. It doesn't count as being your own advocate. You know what you need if you're the White Sox. You need some back-end pitching help. You need some bullpen help. You need a second baseman desperately. And the answer to all your problems, the answer to the leaking ship, is a left-handed specialist with a 4 career ERA. I have to say this, and I'm going to be pretty blunt right now. This is a cataclysmic failure by the White Sox from top to bottom. The rebuild is over. The rebuild's done. It's been done. 2020 was understandable COVID year, and they did good. They got eliminated. Last year, okay, but they lost in the first round. This year, they may not make the playoffs at this rate. I was willing to be patient with the White Sox. They always start out slow, but this is deathly slow. This is unacceptably slow, and it's not getting any better. They only got 60 games left, and they're 500, still puttering around 500. What happened? Why is this happening? The rebuild's over. You could blame everything on Tony La Russa, and that's fine if you want to. He deserves part of the blame. But I'd say the majority of the blame goes on these players. These are your prized possessions. These are the guys you chose to build a team around. Look what's happening. Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson, they're still producing. Everybody else, it's been up and down. Lance Lynn is not who he once was. It's Dylan Cease who's anchoring this rotation. What about Lucas Giolito, too? Dallas Keuchel was DFA'd. I mean, what's going on? Leury Garcia, with a 60 OPS plus, is playing every day. That's a Tony La Russa problem, but it's also they don't have anybody else to play there. What has happened to this team? We talked about last year how promising it was, even coming into this year. The White Sox were World Series favorites. And now I'll say this, if the White Sox faced off against the Yankees in the ALCS, they'd get swept immediately. They would not win a single game, the White Sox. They've already, it seems like, lost their opportunity. Already. They've already lost their opportunity. What a shame. You make your fan base wait since 2008. And the best you could do is a COVID-shortened playoff appearance and then a real playoff appearance. Both times you get eliminated in round one. Why? It's just frustrating. So frustrating. And I feel for White Sox fans. I know all of you want to blame the manager. You want to blame other people who maybe don't deserve as much blame, and that's okay. But the main blame, believe it or not, is the players. The players right now are not performing. The people the White Sox trusted to develop and get better are not performing. Eloy Jimenez is not who he was supposed to be. He isn't. Some of these signings have not worked out, like Dallas Keuchel. And yes, Tony La Russa has also regressed this year. And it seems like at times he doesn't even want to be there. Rick Hahn is to blame. He signed Dallas Keuchel. He signed some of these players that haven't worked. He's drafted some of them. He traded Fernando Tatis Jr. Remember that? Now look at the Padres. Everybody is to blame from top down for this. And this is not acceptable. Don't listen to anybody tell you it is, because it isn't. And they're going to fire Tony La Russa at the end of the year, but that does not solve the problem, because at the end of the day, your second baseman is still Larry Garcia. Your GM is still Rick Hahn, and your owner is still Jerry Reinsdorf. This is like the Bears situation all over again. Nothing will change if you just fire the manager. These players are not performing. This GM has signed bad players. And this owner, at times, is unwilling to spend money. Although I will say the White Sox have the highest payroll in team history this year, but they're spending their money on the wrong pieces, which leads to 0 wins, 0 production, 0 growth. It's another top-down situation. And really, this is one of the biggest shames in recent Chicago sports history, next to the Cubs, which we'll get to in a second. But the White Sox asked for patience, and their fans gave it to them. From 2008, they were supposed to be great. We saw rumblings in 2020. We saw a division championship in 2021, and now we may see a non-playoff team in 2022. Wow, that's unacceptable. And nobody cares. Nobody's making a big deal about this. This needs to be made a bigger deal. Or the anger is being displaced at the wrong person. Everybody wants Tony La Russa's head. Everybody wants him fired. And well, there have been times in which it's been justified. I'll say this. It's not the Hall of Fame manager's fault that players aren't performing. It's not the Hall of Fame manager's fault that the GM is picking crappy players. And it's not the Hall of Fame manager's fault that the owner seemingly does not care. It's from the top all the way down. From player to owner and everything in between. That's how far this stretches for the White Sox. And until more people realize that, you're going to think everything's going to be fine when Tony La Russa gets fired. It won't be. You could bring in anybody else you want. You could have kept Rick Renteria. The fact is, it would not have been better, and it won't be better unless there's real change. Unless there's going to be money committed to the right players. Unless there's going to be a new GM, maybe a new owner. I doubt that's going to happen, but there need to be real changes for the White Sox. Firing a manager is not a radical enough change to induce a better team. These guys aren't performing. They're not performing. And nobody has the energy and the zest that was there last year and the year before. It's funny, when the White Sox were considered underdogs, there was more of a fire, more of a passion. This year, they were considered favorites, and they're playing 500 ball. How do you explain that? They really got to buck up before it's too late. I'll tell you this much. If they don't even make the playoffs, talk about a real shame. And talk about misleading your fans, which is even worse. A lot of people are very passionate about the White Sox. They may not have the fan base or the money that the Cubs do, but I'll tell you what, they have loyal, passionate fans. This, what you're seeing right now, is not what they deserve. And this trade deadline fiasco, in which all you did was get a left-handed reliever with a 4 career ERA, is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And you know who that's on? Rick Hahn. Not Tony La Russa, not even the players. Rick Hahn. A lot of people like Rick Hahn. All I know is this: he's had 2 winning seasons as a GM. Keep that in mind. You could say he's handcuffed by Jerry Reinsdorf and Ken Williams, still something to do with it, but at the end of the day, he's the general manager. And under him, there have been 2 winning seasons. Every other year has been a crapshoot. This year might be a crapshoot. How about we start pointing the finger at him and not just Tony La Russa? It's not Tony La Russa. It's not fire Tony La Russa, get rid of him, and all our problems go away. No, there are serious problems here. There's money being invested in wrong people. There's no sense of urgency, and these players are not performing. Firing the manager won't just make a difference. More needs to be done for the White Sox to be better. Want to shift to this. The Cubs are in a much different boat. They've already done so much damage to themselves and their fan base that we don't even need to get into who needs to be fired and what needs to be changed. That's a way different conversation. We need to talk about the fact that they are in a rebuild. Whether they want to admit it or not, they're in a rebuild. And being in a rebuild means there are certain expectations that have to be met. You're rebuilding, you're not contending, you're not wishing to contend. What you need to do is find a way to get from point A to point B. Point A is the very bottom, which is where they are now. Point B is another World Series. So from this point on, you have to make decisions that set you up for your next World Series. That should be the goal with this whole thing. Your goal should be, how do we get back to where we were in 2016? What moves could we make to get to that point? What could we do to get to that point? To me, it's a pretty simple philosophy, but for some, obviously, it's confusing, including Jed Hoyer. You have a perennial all-star catcher, and you have Ian Happ. Why they're still with the Cubs today is beyond me. And this is not a personal attack. Don't get it twisted. This is not a personal attack on Ian Happ or Willson Contreras. This is the truth. Their values are at an all-time high. All-time high. And you are a rebuilding team. Why do you still have them? Why? Ian Happ is a journeyman who's had 1 good year this year. His value is at an all-time high. Willson Contreras, his value is at an all-time high. Why did you keep them? Why didn't you make a move? You could have set yourself up. You could have brought in significant prospects and continued to grow your depleted farm system. And instead, you keep them. By the time the Cubs are ready to contend again, Contreras is going to be in his mid-30s and Happ might be 30. That doesn't make sense. If you're going to proclaim they're part of our core, they're going to be with us for the long haul, well, your timeline does not match up with their ages. So maybe, instead of caving into fan demands, you should have just sold them off. You already did that last year. You already swallowed a big pill by selling off Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez. By the way, those 3 moves all paying off great. Why didn't you do the same thing with Contreras and Happ? Do you actually plan on paying them significant money? Do you actually think they're going to be ready to go when you're ready to go? Will the timeline synchronize? No, they won't. And if they do, it's going to be for a limited amount of time. Another mistake by Jed Hoyer and company. Really, I still blame Theo Epstein for the Cubs being in this situation, but Jed Hoyer's to blame now for not pulling the trigger. The Cubs asked for too much. They asked for too much to give up Willson and Happ. Understand who they are, too. Happ is having a career year. He's never done this before. Contreras is a good catcher, but still has some defensive deficiencies. Whatever was given to you for them, you should have taken, and you should have made the trade, and they didn't. Just another misstep by the Cubs. I don't understand why you didn't make a move. Their value was high. This was the time to do it, and they didn't. They failed to pull the trigger. And moving forward, this is only going to bite them in the butt. You could have gotten back a prospect haul, and instead you chose emotion. Last year, the Cubs chose no emotion. They got it done. This year, they chose emotion. Now they're going to lose out on prospects, and they're going to be paying out tons of money that isn't necessary. For once, let's think rationally. The Cubs are a business, and the Cubs are in the business of winning. Does keeping Willson, Contreras, and Ian Happ help you win in the future? It's really a 50-50 toss-up. But I do know this. Trading them now at the height of their value for big-time prospects and having them all debut together in a year or two, I think that's a better idea. Really, I do. I think that's a much better idea than keeping them around, waiting for other prospects to come up, and all these prospects are going to be 20 years old, and they're going to be 35 and 32, and their window is going to be over. I get the appeal of having them be franchise guys, but there's a difference between loyalty and winning. So funny, the Cubs had no issues last year trading Baez, Bryant, and Rizzo, but yet this year, there's too much of an affinity over Contreras and Happ. It doesn't make sense. They completely screwed this up. And now they sit way under 500 and further away from getting back to point B, a World Series. Ask yourself this. Did holding on to Willson Contreras and Ian Happ get the Cubs closer to a World Series? That's how you have to ask it. That's how you have to frame it. This is how you frame whether or not this was a good idea. Does holding on to Ian Happ and Willson Contreras get the Cubs closer to a World Series? And they're already rebuilding. What do you think? I think we all know the answer. That's the problem. Sometimes you have to put business and winning over emotion. And it just doesn't make sense because last year the Cubs did that perfectly. And yet this year, they stepped back on it. You could try and justify it any way you want. You could say Willson Contreras is a great player. Ian Happ's having a career year. Bottom line, does keeping them help the Cubs get closer to winning it all again? To me, not so much. They could have gotten back a haul. By the time the Cubs are ready to compete again, they're going to be older. And their primes are going to be over. So the Cubs just set themselves up for more failure. And they chose emotion over winning. Something they didn't do last year. Shame on Jed Hoyer. Shame on the Cubs once more for screwing this up. I know you need attractions for fans. I know there's a loyalty, an affinity to Contreras and Happ. But I'll tell you this, Cubs fans. You want a World Series again, right? You want 2016 again, right? You want a core. You want people you could root for. You want winning. Hey, guess what? This Cubs team ain't winning. This Cubs team is far from winning again. You need to do everything possible to get closer to winning. And right now, they're far from doing it. So before you put emotion over reality, think about that. Are you willing to watch Willson Contreras and Ian Happ struggle through 90 lost teams for the next couple of years, or would you rather have them gone and have the timeline sped up a little bit? It's that simple. The Cubs chose for more mediocrity and keeping a couple of franchise guys, and that's fine. But then don't be mad when it's 5 years from now and they're just starting to get good versus making these trades and speeding it up by a year or two at most. Thanks for watching today's show. Really appreciate the time. Remember, you can find everything about me at sportstalkchicago.com. Old articles, podcasts, interviews, videos, all of it at sportstalkchicago.com. So long, everyone.